Kevin.
Hi.
Hi, Kevin.
Okay, and the echo's gone?
Echo free.
Good. Okay, so as Olivia probably told you, our magazine is called Shifter Magazine, and we're a magazine for creators, for people who aspire to create. So our readers are filmmakers, they're music producers, anyone who's in a creative field is who our audience is. So I'm here with the editor of our film section, who's Vladimir Jean-Gilles, as well as our film critic, Mathieu Chin-Quee. So we're just going to ask you a few questions about Room.
All right. So, Mr. Abrahamson, first of all, congratulations on the film. We really liked it. It's Matthew's favorite of the year.
And I've seen a lot of movies this year.
That's really, really nice to hear. Thank you so much.
All right. So, just to start here, the first job of a director is to pull great performances from his actors and performers. So, how was working with such a young actor such as Jacob? And what did you do to help draw that type of incredible performance out of him?
Well, I mean, I think my approach to actors is to treat each actor, to encounter each actor as the person they are. So I don't have a single approach. I work with that particular person and find a way of forming a relationship with them that's meaningful and that helps us both to kind of find the truth of the character. So with Jake, it's the same, except in this case, it's a relationship with a child. And I think the fundamental aspect of any adult-child relationship is trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, it was about talking to Jake in a way which was not condescending or patronizing, finding a language that we could use together that meant something to me and to him, and to creating just that trust between us. And I think after that, then I used sort of every technique that I could think of, depending on the sort of scene we were shooting or the mood that Jake was in, or whatever technique helped him to get where he needed to get. So sometimes it was there were scenes where it was not appropriate for him to really understand what was happening, and we had to find a different way of talking about the scene. So I wouldn't tell him, what Nick was doing in the room, but I could talk to him about times that he was afraid, that Jake was afraid, what it felt like. I could get him to tell me about bad dreams that he'd had and how he felt when he woke up, and then we could do sort of work out how that made him hold his body and what it made him do with his voice and his face, and we would find the right language for the scene in that way. Sometimes it was quite mechanical, like when he was in the wardrobe, and I would get him to hold the position for a few seconds. I'd count, I'd tell him to reach up and touch the fabric of the dress above his head, or very simple mechanical directions. And then other times, he would, because he's a remarkable kid with huge talent, he would just somehow, as if he were an adult actor, he would really understand the scene, and then I could just let him go and he would run and do it. I mean, remarkably, some of those scenes, especially towards the end of the movie, because we shot in sequence, we were able to, the scenes we shot towards the end were the end scenes. He was so much more confident than he had been at the beginning that he was really able to, run the scene pretty much completely and truthfully himself, which is pretty amazing for a 9-year-old, for an 8-year-old at that point.
Yeah, I remember when I was watching it, I was like, some of the things that he's portraying and some of the things that kid had to understand the character, and by extension, I guess Jacob had to understand. It's some things that I haven't even seen some adult actors do, and the way you had said that you left some details out because it's a little bit too deep for him or too heavy for him to understand. I think that was incredible.
Well, the thing is, I find if you get a good child actor, I mean, there's no better actor than a child who's comfortable in front of camera, because he really had no agenda. I mean, he wanted to, he loves acting. It's a total pleasure for him. It's his passion. And he was so full of joy and so enjoyed it that, it's a very pure kind of relationship I think you can have with a child in drama.
Okay, so I just recently watched your previous movie before this, Frank, and I really liked it. And what I found, it was on the surface, it's a quirky, fun movie, but when you kind of dig deeper, it deals with similar issues to Room, but Room is a lot darker on the surface. So what were some of the challenges associated with that, and how do you prepare moving from something a little bit happier to something darker? Like, what was your transition like in your preparation process?
Well, I think if you, so my earlier film before Frank, I think you would recognize similarities to Room. So in a way, Frank was the one that was the unusual one. It was the first movie that I made, which was really as playful as that, you know, and as kind of as freewheeling and just like creative for creative sake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where part of the fun of the movie is just how ridiculous and how playful and how sort of inventive you can be. That's what the audience is enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ultimately my approach is always the same, which is to find something under the surface. And I think in Frank, there's a sort of light and comedic way of seeing the film, and then it does change. It does transform itself into something, I think, more intimate and moving, certainly towards the end. I was going to say, in Room, the thing is, I think that the thing that I always like to go in a direction that an audience doesn't expect. That's something that I've done in all my films. And I think in Room, and Frank certainly does that, and then again in Room, I think going into the story, you expect it to be this very dark, bleak meditation on captivity, and actually it's a film about love and parenting, and I think that is revealed as you move through in a way that's unexpected to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a way, the films kind of parallel each other. Like, Frank starts off a little lighter tone, and then once Frank takes off the head, it comes a little darker. And then Room starts off darker, but when Jack and Ma they leave Room, it starts to, I mean, it's still dark a little bit, but then near the end you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, per se.
That's right. It's sort of like if in both cases, actually, people move out of a position of confinement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in Frank's case, it's the head, and in our case, now it's the room.
Uh-huh.
And I think, in a certain way, Frank has a darker ending because for me, it has something positive about it because you sense that he is back with the people that he loves.
Yeah.
But in Room, I think the possibility of life is really clear at the end.
Now you're now an Academy Award nominated and CSA nominated director. And what advice would you have for an up-and-coming director trying to get where you are now, especially after all the transition that you've been through from working on certain projects to this one now?
I would say, some very simple advice for me would be to do the things that you feel passionate about and compelled to do, and not to think as a career maker. You know,
Yes.
because I think if I decided to choose projects with a view to becoming successful and well known or getting an Academy Award nomination, I wouldn't have chosen any of the movies that I've done.
Wow.
Because all of them are strange, all of them are challenging, but they were the ones that I felt really compelled by, and therefore they were the ones that I was able to, I think, bring something special to. And I would say to directors, think about the work, and I mean, it sounds really simple and sort of obvious, but sometimes when people are talking about their projects, I find they're saying, oh yeah, I think this would be really cool, and I think it will do this, and we could, people are going to feel this about it. And I think, yeah, but what is it in the project that you are drawn to? Why do you want to tell that story? What is it about that film that is meaningful to you in terms of your relationship to the world and other human beings? That, for me, is the key to having a career which is satisfying for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, if that also connects with other people and you achieve some measure of success, that's wonderful. I think if you chase the success, it never works.
Very true. Very true.
So using your advice on your selection process, both, as we had mentioned before, both Frank and Room, they kind of deal with important social issues in a way. What exactly prompted you to take these movies? What interests you so much? And could you walk us a little bit through your selection process and how you choose them?
Here it is with Frank, right? So, although Frank does deal with sort of serious issues, my real draw to Frank was a much kind of, let me think how would I describe it. Okay, so I love old American vaudeville. I love physical comedy. I love Laurel and Hardy. I love the sort of tradition of clowning.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
I've always loved it. And when I read this early draft of Frank, and Frank was the first film that I made that came from outside, you know what I mean? It came to me by my agent.
Mm-hmm.
When I read it, what I really responded to was just those images of that kind of strange, lonely, but ultimately kind of playful figure of Frank in the head. And those images stuck with me, and I kept thinking, I really want to see him in a landscape. I really want to see him sitting in a room with other people. And so it was like this delicious desire to play with that sort of toy box.
Yeah.
That's what really drew me to it. And music, because I'm a huge music person. I thought, what a challenge to make a movie about a band where you maybe even believe the band, because I think Frank's the first movie, I think some people said to me where they go, yeah, I actually believe that it's a band. So it's not just a bunch of pretending to play together. Then with Room, very emotional, immediate connection. I read the novel. I was a parent. I had two kids at the time I read Room. One was just about to be 4, the other one was like 1. So they were tiny. And my whole life was a sort of immersion in the experience of parenthood and parenting. And being a parent makes you think about your own childhood, and that entire sort of that circle of parent-child was the thing that was really alive for me at that time. And so when I read the novel, it just spoke to me emotionally in a really powerful way. And I also, so that was the sort of deeper draw. And then as an artist and as a craft person, I'm always drawn to a challenge. Like in Frank, it was the head, but here it was, how do you shoot in a tiny room and still give people that sense of childhood and the possibilities of childhood, and how do you deal with a structure where half the film is really divided into 2 halves? That's again very unusual. So that there was a challenge and an emotional prize when both those things came together in Room.
Wow. Very last question. Now that you've come so far, and we're just very curious about your next projects and how you're going to be approaching them, and what is it, as far as you can tell us, what is it that you can tell us about your next projects?
There are a few things that I'm working on, but movie-wise, there's one project in the UK which is a very interesting. It's the first time I've done anything with any genre element, but it's a sort of ghost story, but it's really an allegory of class and in Britain in the 1940s. But that's one. It's called The Little Stranger, based on a book by Sarah Waters. And then the other project that I'm working really actively on is a film about a man called Emil Griffith, who was a black boxer from the American Virgin Islands, who came to New York in the late 50s. And he was an extraordinary man because on the one hand he was gay and was quite comfortable with his sexuality, and he hung out around the gay bars of Times Square when it was illegal, to be, like it was still illegal on the statute books.
Yeah.
And at the same time he became the world champion welterweight boxer, and so his life illustrates these incredible contradictions of that period, but also a study of a really quite unique human being who was himself, okay with who he was, but had to deal with this sort of dysfunctional society around him. And there's an amazing story. His story is extraordinary. He had a feud with another boxer, which ended in
I love boxing movies like Rocky and Creed and all those. I love them. And I'm really looking forward to that one.
Thank you. I think it's a really powerful story. If you just look him up, there's footage of him. He was a very famous figure in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and he was one of the first sports people who really, in a more public way, embraced his sexuality. Later on, got involved in the Stonewall movement, and at a time when in a macho sport like boxing, such a difficult road to travel. So, really remarkable guy.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Abrahamson. And again, congratulations on the film. We'll be watching the Academy Awards pretty soon and cheering for you at the very same time.
Listen, thank you so much, guys. It was a real pleasure to talk. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.